Hello everyone and welcome. So this is going to be the functionality demo for the service dashboard application or services dashboard application. Now uh, we are starting where we left off from the setup video, and if you have not checked that out, make sure you check the setup out first. And in this particular video we are going to exercise the functionality of the application from the perspective of an administrative user and also a non-administrative user. So let's go ahead and do that. So notice that we don't have any services on the dashboard, right? Because we didn't add any services. So as an administrative user, you can do that. Notice that as a non-administrative user, you don't really have that option. So let's go ahead and so again, make sure that you have checked the setup video. In this particular browser, Chrome, we have logged in as an administrative user, and here we have logged in as a non-administrative user. So let's go ahead and add some services. So I'm going to go ahead and add and say managed MongoDB, best managed MongoDB service, or whatever description you want, right? I'm going to add some notification recipients. So this is going to be a comma separated email IDs. I'm going to add an email ID that I want to show you that they are receiving the notifications for this. What I can do is come up with a temp email ID as well, and copy this email. And go ahead and paste it here, right? And let's go ahead and add. So notice that we added service. Let's go ahead and add a couple of more services here. Maybe let's say you run a weather web service as well. I'm going to keep the notification recipients as the same. All right, so we added two services. What we can do now is go to the dashboard and refresh. So notice that we have these two web services that we have added now. Now let's look at also the non-administrative user. Refresh. Notice that they also get to, because they have logged in as a Google user, but they are not administrators, right? So yeah, so we have these two web services added here that we manage for our customer, let's say, right? So now what we can do is go into and check the service history. So notice that it says the service is operating normally because we just added it, right? So let's go ahead and update the status of a service, and let's see how it shows on the dashboard as well as on the other screens. So go to service operations, search for services. Now you can search for a particular service as well. For example, let's search for this, right? But I'm going to go ahead and so let's say for this managed MongoDB, I go and update the status. So let's say I say the status is degraded and say some timeouts experienced, working on it, something like that, and go ahead and update that. So we updated the service status to be degraded, right? So now let's go ahead to our dashboard, refresh. So notice that not only do we see the status here, but also we see the recent message that the status of the application is degraded. We can go back, or application or service, go back to the non administrative user, also refresh there. Notice that, and you can of course refresh the page if you want it, right? So notice that now you are able to tell your customers that the service status is degraded. Now next up, let's see when we updated the status, what really happened. Did we get an email? So in my temporary email, notice that we get a service dashboard alert. I'm going to go ahead and click that. Notice that it says the service managed MongoDB, new status is degraded, old status is active, and this is the time at which the status changed, and it also sends you the timeout, the details of what really happened, right? And you can visit the service dashboard, which it will basically take you to that particular um, um, application, which is this, so that you can track the status and also look at the history. So now let's look at from a customer's perspective, right? Customer has gotten a notification now. They can actually come and refresh on this dashboard. They'll know that, okay, the service status is degraded. They also received the notification which prompted them to come here. They can look at the service history as well. So notice that it says, okay, it went from here to here, right? Now let's say the service experiences an outage, right? So again, you can update that, right? Let's go ahead and as an administrator, do service operations, go ahead, update status. So we can say and let's go ahead and update that. Notice that it is updated, refresh. So now notice that it shows the service status to be outage. Also, you're seeing the latest message here. Same will be seen by the customer. Customer is also going to get the notification as well. Service history gets updated as well, right? So this gives them a general sense of how the service has been doing, right? So that's really that. So now let's go ahead and take a look at whether they got an email or not. So notice that there is a new alert now. So you can go and check that. So now notice that it says the new status is outage, right? Service status is outage. All right. So now that pretty much covers the bulk of the functionality of this application. From the administrative access, you can obviously look at the dashboard, recent messages, you can add a service, you can search for a service, you can actually go ahead and delete a service as well. We're not showing it here, but yeah, we have shown it in the documentation. You can of course update the settings, you can go to the help, and then it's gonna route it you for the most part to this post as well. Now the one functionality that we want to check is, let's say you have a situation where your customer or your administrators do not want to manually update the status of the application, but they want to update, or you have an existing tooling that can actually make an API call to this application and update the status, right? Instead of that way the status gets updated in real time, and the administrators don't have to update it manually. So how can we do that, right? So for that, the API endpoint is running. So this is the main application. This is the default service. This is the API endpoint for updating the service statuses, which we have already deployed. So if you see in the services, we deployed this, but we haven't used this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this link. Now, what we have to do basically is use a tool like Postman to actually send message, so that how we have updated the service status manually earlier, right? We want to see how it gets updated automatically, right? So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to set up my Postman and come back. All right, so now what we are going to demonstrate, again, this is an optional functionality where if you want to update the status of your application via some internal tooling that you already have, without manually updating the status as we have seen earlier, right? You can use this. For that, obviously, we have deployed this particular endpoint, and now we're going to make, using Postman, a put request, and within this put request, obviously, we have the body of the message, right? And we have also added a header, which is basically sd/ or dash API dash key, and this is the same API key that we had updated into the settings during the setup video, right? So let's go ahead and run this. So notice that now it says the service updated, manage MongoDB, right? So let's see if that actually went through. So let's go to this home, refresh. So notice that now this manage MongoDB service is active. One thing I want to tell is that if you have like tens of services that you manage, the service dashboard actually orders them according to status. So services that are in a status which you really need to make sure that you attain to are at the top. So the services that are outage status, they are at the top, then the degraded services, and then the active services, right? So now we have the manage MongoDB to be active because we made it active via, let's say, some existing tooling using the API endpoint that we set up. So notice that it also updates the recent messages. It would have sent an email to your customers, right, as well. And also customers can come here and let's say they land on this page. Notice they also see that the application status or service status is now active, right? Also, let's look at whether they received the notification email or not. So notice that we have altogether 3 emails. One when the service went from active to degraded state, from degraded state to outage state. This we did manually, and then via API endpoint, which again is an optional functionality. If you have some existing tooling, you can use that. And it went to active state, right? So again, that also gave your customers the notification. I'm going to go ahead and click that. So notice that now it says the service managed MongoDB is in an active state, right? The old status was outage, and at this time it went into the active state, right? And also details, right? It says all issues resolved, service working normally. So notice that with this particular application, you get a lot of functionality. One, definitely you get to notify your customers of the particular state of the current status of your application or service, right? Then you don't really have to worry about access because what's happening here is you can only enable the administrators the access to update your services, right? And because the application itself runs in its own project, the blast radius is reduced, right? Everybody else, if they want to access this UI, they just have to log in with any Google ID. It could be Gmail ID as well. And they get to look at the status of the application, right? Also, if you do not want to manually update the status or your administrators don't want to do that, then in that case, they can always use the API endpoint via the external or via the, via any kind of existing tooling, right? So that pretty much covers what we wanted to show. So we have covered the functionality of services dashboard application, and do make sure if you want to use it, go ahead and set it up first. And if you want to make sure that you want to read about it first, go and check out this particular blog post. This video as well as the video of the setup will be linked here as well. So all right, thank you very much, and happy cloud computing, everybody. Thanks.